Margaret Alvarez, a 65-year-old grandmother from Miami, thought she was flying into a fairy tale romance with Dubai Sheikh, only to step straight into a nightmare of lies, luxury, and captivity. At 65, Margaret Alvarez was the kind of woman people in her Miami neighborhood admired. She had spent her younger years teaching children, raising her only daughter, and taking care of her late husband until cancer claimed him far too early. Retirement left her with a quiet house, a small pension, and long days that often felt empty. To fill the silence, she tended to her garden, browsed old photo albums, and scrolled through her phone late at night. It was during one of those nights that she discovered a profile online belonging to a man who called himself Sheikh Khalid. His picture showed a life most people only saw in magazines. Glittering skyscrapers, golden palaces, sleek sports cars, and endless ocean views from private yachts. His words painted him as generous and charming, a widowed man who admired strength and grace in women rather than youth and vanity. Margaret had never been one to fall for daydreams, but the attention felt different, almost intoxicating. For months, he wrote to her every day, telling her she was special, unlike anyone he had met before. He praised her life experience, her kindness, and her wisdom. It felt flattering in a way she hadn't felt in decades. The loneliness that once weighed on her seemed lighter, replaced by excitement she didn't realize she had been missing. When he finally invited her to Dubai, promising her comfort, luxury, and companionship, she convinced herself it was a once-in-a-lifetime chance. Friends warned her to be cautious, but she brushed off her concerns, believing she had found something rare. She packed her best clothes, boarded her flight with trembling hands, and told herself she was stepping into the adventure of her golden years. What she couldn't see was that her golden dream was already turning into a trap. The moment Margaret stepped off the plane, she felt swept into a world that shimmered with promise. The airport itself was a spectacle of glass and gold, with luxury shops lining every corridor and the scent of exotic perfumes hanging in the air. A man in a tailored suit waited for her at the arrival's gate, holding a sign with her name neatly printed. He spoke politely, ushered her into a black luxury car, and whisked her away into the glowing city. Through the window, she saw towers piercing the sky, fountains dancing to music, and neon lights reflecting off spotless streets. Every sight seemed to confirm the fairy tale she had been promised. The car pulled up to a sprawling villa outside the city, its gates guarded and its gardens perfectly manicured. Inside, the staff greeted her warmly, bowing as they carried her bags. A room had been prepared for her, draped in silks and overlooking a private pool. She was told the sheik had business matters to attend to, but would meet her soon. To reassure her, they offered a lavish dinner and champagne. Margaret, though slightly disappointed, accepted the explanation and decided patience was part of the process. But soon the details began to trouble her. Her passport was politely taken for safekeeping. Her phone was collected to adjust it for local service. She noticed discreet cameras tucked into corners of the villa, watching her even as she tried to relax. At first, she brushed these off as part of a wealthy man's world, where privacy and security might be different from her own. Still, unease crept into her chest. Each night passed without meeting the sheik, and each day she felt her freedom shrinking in ways she could not yet understand. The villa that had seemed like paradise quickly revealed itself as something else. At first, Margaret enjoyed the comfort of fine meals, soft linens, and polished marble floors. But soon she realized she was being watched too closely. 2 guards followed her everywhere, always within a few feet. When she tried to step outside the villa gates for a walk, she was gently but firmly guided back inside. The words were polite, yet the pressure in her eyes left no doubt. She was not free to come and go as she pleased. The luxury around her began to feel more like chains disguised in gold. One morning, a stack of documents was brought to her room. They were explained as marriage agreements, something the sheik supposedly wished to arrange before meeting her in person. The pages were covered in complex legal wording, some in English and some in Arabic. At first, Margaret thought it was simply part of foreign tradition, but as she skimmed the English sections, her stomach tightened. The papers granted control over her pension, her bank accounts, and even her modest home in Miami. It wasn't a marriage proposal. It was a transfer of everything she owned. When she hesitated, the staff who had once been warm turned cold. Their smiles vanished, their voices sharp and clipped. She was told it would be unwise to refuse, and that her safety depended on her cooperation. That was the moment Margaret's hopes shattered. She realized there was no Sheikh waiting to welcome her, no love story waiting to unfold. She was a target, caught in the hands of people who knew exactly how to use her loneliness against her. The villa was not a sanctuary but a prison, and every corner of it echoed with danger. Margaret's fear grew into determination. She could not sit quietly while strangers planned to strip her of everything she owned. Days turned into weeks, and though she was constantly watched, she began paying attention to the routines of those around her. The guards rotated shifts, the kitchen staff moved in and out with deliveries, and occasionally a gate in the back garden was left unlatched for supplies. It was a small detail, but it became her only thread of hope. Late one night, when the villa was quieter than usual, she decided to take her chance. She dressed in plain clothes, slipped on comfortable shoes, and waited for the guards to grow distracted. Heart pounding, she crept through the corridors, down the garden path, and toward the gate she had studied for so long. For the first time since her arrival, the air outside felt fresh, and freedom seemed just steps away. She imagined herself finding help, contacting authorities, and returning to Miami with her story of survival. But the illusion collapsed in an instant. Before she could reach the road, headlights flooded her vision. A black SUV swerved to a stop, and men leapt out, grabbing her arms before she had time to scream. She was dragged back through the gate, her attempts to fight swallowed by their strength. The guards who once only watched and now treated her as nothing more than property to be controlled. From that night forward, her world grew darker. Her room was stripped of luxury, leaving her with only a bed and bare walls. Every movement was monitored, and she was no longer addressed with politeness. She overheard hushed conversations about selling her identity details and draining her accounts. Her escape had failed, and now her captors wanted her to understand that there was no way out. Back in Miami, Margaret's sudden silence raised alarm. Her niece, who spoke with her almost daily, noticed the calls and messages had stopped the very day Margaret arrived in Dubai. At first, she assumed it was a time difference or travel fatigue, but as days stretched into weeks, worry turned into panic. She contacted authorities in Miami, showing them the messages, the photos of the so-called Sheikh and Margaret's flight details. Investigators quickly recognized the signs of an international romance scam. With no time to lose, they reached out to law enforcement in Dubai. Meanwhile, Margaret's situation inside the villa grew more desperate. She felt her strength fading under constant confinement, her hopes shrinking with each passing day. What she didn't know was that her case was already under surveillance. Dubai police, tipped off by the Americans, had begun monitoring the villa. For weeks they tracked movements in and out, piecing together the criminal network operating under the mask of wealth and luxury. The guards, the staff, even the luxury cars were all part of a facade built to lure victims like her. One night, long after Margaret had given up believing anyone would find her, the sound of heavy footsteps thundered through the villa. Doors crashed open. Shouts in Arabic filled halls, and armed officers swarmed the property. In minutes, the guards who once terrified her were pinned to the ground. The so-called Sheikh was unmasked as nothing more than a middle-aged fraudster, backed by a ring of con artists who had trapped multiple victims. Margaret wasn't the only one. Several other foreigners, just as lost and frightened, were freed alongside her. As she stepped out of the villa under police protection, the neon lights of Dubai felt different. They no longer promised wonder. They reminded her of the nightmare she had narrowly survived. When Margaret finally returned to Miami, she was not the same woman who had boarded the plane weeks earlier with hope in her heart. The city she once found ordinary now felt like a sanctuary. Walking through her own front door brought tears to her eyes, though the silence of her home carried a new weight. She had escaped with her life, but the scars, emotional and psychological, would not fade quickly. The glittering dream of love and security had nearly cost her everything, and she knew she would never look at a stranger's promises in the same way again. Her family rallied around her, grateful she had been rescued before the criminals drained her finances completely or caused her further harm. Still, Margaret carried guilt. She blamed herself for being naive, for ignoring the warnings of her friends. Yet as she reflected, she realized the trap she fell into was carefully built to exploit loneliness, trust, and hope. She was not the only one fooled, nor would she be the last. In time, Margaret found purpose in sharing her story. She spoke at community centers, senior groups, and church gatherings, urging others to be cautious of online relationships that seemed too perfect. Each time she recounted her ordeal, she felt stronger, reclaiming power from those who tried to silence her. Her message was simple. Scams thrive in silence, but they weaken when exposed. The experience left her wary, but not broken. Margaret returned to her garden, to the rhythm of ordinary days, but with a sharper sense of the dangers lurking behind glittering images online. Her survival became more than her own story. It became a warning echoed across her community, a reminder that what shines brightest can sometimes be the path into darkness.